Welcome back to Following Note on a Stormlight podcast. This week's episode 73, and we are doing chapters 62 through 65 of part 3 of Oathbringer. We have 2 Shalon chapters and 2 Dalinar chapters. In our episode this week, we're still on our cookie cutter patterns of 2 point of view chapters back to 2 point of view chapters that we started last week. We're not throwing in, Yasna and Scar and Drei and Moash. And we're back to our main 3, Dalinar, Shalon, and Kaladin point of view for now. So, first of all, Paul, how are you? And who's on our mug?
So, this week on our mug, I'm doing well, by the way. That doesn't matter too much. What does matter, though, is on our mug we have Shaunity, however you want to say it. So everyone say it. Give a little golf clap for Shaunity. Thank you so much for supporting our mug this week. I guess I hope you like music or pianos. I have a little piano mug here. So I hope that's cool to you. If not, then I'm sorry, but there can't be a redo right now. So my apologies if that's. Thank you for your support.
Thank you for supporting us on Patreon, Shaunity. Eliot, how are you?
Patreon. Oh, I almost forgot to mention he is a surgeon, I believe. That is correct. Last week I was Spearman. No. He's an ardent.
I'm fairly certain he's an ardent. Let me check.
I don't think you're right on this. I would like to challenge this officially.
Challenge. I'll go to the review.
He's a surgeon.
Shaunity is an ardent $10 tier.
Well, thank you, Double E.
You're
Shaunity.
You're 0 for 2 for guessing our tiers.
But and the funny thing is, I didn't think I was guessing either of them. I thought I was just right. Okay, but last week, this is me saving my tail right now. I was thinking the $10 tier, but I thought that was surgeon. Like I had our tiers mixed up in my head. This time I was wrong. I'm sorry, Sean.
Yeah. All right, Ellie, how are you?
I'm sorry.
I'm doing good. These chapters this week, though, are getting a little weird. I'm really interested to talk to you guys about them because some funky stuff is going down for our characters.
You don't think deliberately attracting a pain spread on purpose is a normal thing to do?
The normal thing if you're Shalon.
True.
That was
apparently
very depressing and sad, but true. All right, 2 words, and I won't forget to ask them about them after our intro this time. Paul.
I have crazy and confusion.
Crazy and confusion. Eliot?
My 2 words are love quadrangle.
Okay, love quadrangle and crazy confusion.
Good luck keeping a straight face saying that one.
I just did. Let's use these 4 words and talk about Oathbringer.
Congrats on keeping a straight face, Trevor. Way to go.
All right, Eliot, how do you spell quadrangle? You have to be able to spell them in order to use them now.
How do I spell quadrangle? That's not hard. Quadrangle. It is a thing. Go Google it. I am trying to, however, mash up like quadratic, rectangle, and triangle into one, which I'll explain a little more when we get down to the chapter. But we have a very strange little love triangle that's sort of turning into like a love rectangle, but there's still only 3 people involved. Yeah, it's getting confusing. We'll talk about it later.
And your other word? Oh, wait, those are 2 words.
That's both.
Got it. Paul?
So I have crazy, which is referring to Miss Shalon a bit. Like it's not that she's crazy, it's that she's the right kind of crazy for what's happening here. Referring to the pain spread moment there. And then confusion. This word always applies to me as I'm confused, but in our story, I think there's a lot of confusion with our sprint and with pattern specifically, and I kind of want to dive into that more as we go forward, or at least it seems like there's kind of like a stress in their bond, which I will talk about as we go forward. But I'm that was the main reason why for pattern.
All right. So let's talk about Shallan. Both of your guys' words included Shallan. We just got out of 2 Kaladin point of view chapters, and we jumped to a Shallan point of view chapters, but it's the same storyline. So we're still in the same setting, whatever. Shallan and Kaladin are in the same room. So we just swapped over to Shallan, and Adolin brings them to his old tailor. And Adolin has a funny line of, Kaladin, I really was thinking, who would I trust with my life? That in the walls of Kholinar, of course it's going to be my tailor, because that's the type of, I would trust my tailor with my life, because that's who Adolin is. So there's a nice quote for you. And Eliot, the first thing on our outline is Shallan is a bit crazy. So do you want to talk about this for a little bit?
Paul, you definitely picked the right word, because I read through this whole chapter thinking, like, what the heck is Shallan doing? I even get it towards the end, what she's trying to accomplish here. She's just grabbing scissors and stabbing herself in the leg. She's intentionally revealing herself awkwardly by tripping over stuff and
in front of the
oops
king.
And getting all right in front of all the men and getting all embarrassed. And she's doing all of this just so she can get the strange spren to appear so she can draw them. It's like, Shallan, you are crazy. In a special Shallan sort of way. I get why she's doing it, but what?
That's what I was saying. So we know Shallan is crazy, right? But
right.
Part of life is finding your kind of crazy, right? And
Fair
I think
enough.
Shallan is the right kind of crazy for what's happening here. I don't think anyone else is really going to do this, so shout out to Shallan. I'm impressed. I guess I was going to say I guess someone has to do it. I don't know if you have to do it, but she notices and she's like, okay, well, I guess I have to stab myself in the leg now. It's just I don't make the rules. I have to stab myself in the leg now to attract fake pain spren.
I guess one way to look at it is, man, is she committed? She's thinking, ooh, there's different spren around here. We need to do some research on this. But instead of a normal person thinking, ooh, I'll just wait till I see a pain spren, she just mean oh, well, let's make some pain spren. Oh, scissors. Okay, great. Wow, that's dedication right there.
And the fact that she doesn't what she's doing isn't really that far-fetched. She's just doing some research. She doesn't tell anyone about it. She's just in the back room stabbing herself with scissors. And
I actually imagine a very humorous movie scene going on right now, where Kaladin and Adolin and Elhokar are trying to have this serious conversation, and there's just Shallan in the background looking around for scissors and grabbing them, and oh, no one's looking, okay, stab, while they're trying to have this serious strategy discussion. It could be played off, I think, rather hilariously if done correctly.
I agree. One thing I want to say though, so it's a really crazy scene, right? There's just all this ridiculousness happening, but there's something that really caught my attention and got me thinking, and that was with Pattern. Whenever she stabs herself in the leg, and Pattern seems very distressed, and he's like, Shallan, first it's okay, Shallan, what did you do? That's a reasonable reaction, but then I think it's more of a Shallan, this isn't how we're supposed to do it, right? This is my understanding is she is attracting pain spren and all these spren herself. She's effectively faking or lying to attract them. I mean, she is really in pain. but it's kind of a weird
it's staged.
Yes, exactly. And that is getting me thinking of like maybe that's why Pattern seems like worried here, and I'm wondering if we're gonna have. I've said this before, and this may just be me beating a dead horse or something, but we had this in the last book with Syl and Kaladin, where there was like a real damage in their bond. And I'm wondering if this is kind of leading to a damage in the bond between Shallan and Pattern. Because she's like staging things or like lying. I guess this is on a different level. And so it has really worried Pattern. He like listening. Maybe this wasn't played as much in the book. I don't know. But in the audiobook, like it was really like there's a lot of buzzing going on. There's a whole lot of and
doesn't that hurt?
Yeah, exactly. So that really got me thinking of like, is Shallan going too far here with faking things or staging things and lying? So
that's an interesting thought. I didn't really think about it that way, but that would be concerning if there is going to start to be some maybe friction in the relationship there. My impression of it was kind of more that that Pattern was just kind of confused by what Shallan was doing, but your take on it, Paul, actually makes a little more sense almost that Pattern's concerned perhaps. So we'll have to keep an eye on this going forward.
I do think it's something. This may not be completely true. I'm actually curious to see from our other readers, if you're watching this, like what your first impression of this was. Because I think that may have been an audiobook thing. Because their voice, like the reader's voice, sounds very distressed and like way more so than just like a "What are you doing?" Like it seemed more like in pain or in like a state of frantic worry than like a "What's happening?" You know. So that's mostly why I came to that conclusion.
The conversation that's happening while Shallan is in the back room, misbehaving, producing spren or whatever, tripping over her skirt to produce embarrassment spren or whatever, shame spren. The tailor is giving them the rundown of what's happening in the city. Of Aesudan has kind of lost it, and she's kind of the tailor. She's not saying that in so many words. She's kind of skirting around that issue of Aesudan's kind of lost it, because Elokar's standing right there. You know, like you're not going to tell the king to his face, yeah, your wife is crazy. Like your wife is going insane. She's kind of, you know, saying that in a roundabout way of Aesudan has a bunch of these weird orders, and she predicted the Parshmen and that type of thing. And Elokar, he's not really thinking that rationally. He's like, oh, it's the Darkspren. It's the Darkspren. We're gonna blame everything on the shadow that's over and Aesudan is the victim here. And Shallan, we get this from the point of view of Shallan in this chapter. Shallan comes to that conclusion pretty quickly of, well, wait a minute here. Some of those topics were before the Darkspren showed up, before the Everstorm showed up. So how is Aesudan really the victim, or what's actually happening here? She has more questions than Elokar does. Elokar is, you know, Aesudan is innocent. This is all Everstorm based. And so do you guys think Kaladin and Adolin picked up on that too? That maybe Aesudan isn't as innocent as Elokar wants to believe, but Shallan certainly picked that up.
I feel like Kaladin and Adolin both are not always the most observant people, so I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't really pick up on the disconnects there, and Shallan was the only one who did. I definitely was trying to wrestle with the like sequence of events and how things are going down. Is this Aesudan's fault? Is this the Darkspren's influence? I couldn't tell though if the tailor was so kind of out of sorts that she's telling the story wrong, or if she's telling the story right, she's just like leaving out bits, and Elokar is just jumping to the conclusion of he doesn't want to, believe ill of his wife. That's kind of where it seems. I mean, we've seen a few other perspectives that have hinted at a not so goodness about Aesodan to make me lean towards the direction of the Taylor's telling the right tale. Elokar's just jumping to her defense too soon.
Do you guys remember our interlude from our young Ardent way back in, I don't even remember when it was. I want to say Words of Radiance at some point, but
I guess it's the end of, like maybe one of the last ones in Words of Radiance, maybe,
where she spends all night writing all over the temple walls and floor denouncing the queen, and then the queen has her hanged or publicly killed, and then a bunch of riots start in the city. Do you guys remember that interlude?
I definitely do, and that's what I was kind of alluding to of our other perspective. As I was remembering back to that other perspective of, we've seen the waste, or the Aesodan doesn't seem to care about the common people, just herself and her palace, perhaps. So that leads toward, something's already wrong before this darkness showed up. Plus, on top of that, I actually, this whole section through these chapters, was thinking all the way back to the prologue of Words of Radiance, because that is one of the first times we even see Aesodan's name. I think we've heard it before that, but that's the first time we really start to think about her as a character, because we learn in that prologue that Jasnah is sneaking around, right? That prologue is from her perspective, and trying to have Aesodan assassinated, which, by the way, is a huge thing that we've not even revisited for a whole book and a half now. That just hasn't really come up, of why in the world was Jasnah trying to assassinate Aesodan on that night. So I'm reading these chapters thinking, already, well, she's already been on the bad books for Jasnah for years. So maybe this is going to tie all the way back to that at some point.
What was the name of the assassin that she sent? Do we know? Or that's actually not that important. I was thinking maybe that assassin is the High Marshal Azure or whoever.
If I was a better host, I could tell you, but alas.
Right. I have it in front of me because I was actually looking at it earlier. It appears her name is Liss. Liss. Liss.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, nothing really happened with that, so that's kind of weird. Do we think that's just Brandon Sanderson giving us something to think about and leaving it at that, or is it still gonna be relevant?
We also have no context of why Jasnah was trying to assassinate her. This is 7 years ago at this point, so
that's true.
And it's clear that after the events of that night, Jasnah changes her mind, right? Because she doesn't, over the following 6-7 years, follow through with that plan. So I'm really hoping that we're going to get to meet Aesodan for the first time and actually get to see what we're dealing with and why she seems to be a fairly polarizing character. But we don't meet her quite yet in these chapters, at least.
So at the end of chapter 62, Shallan reveals herself to her 3 crewmates, and they're all kind of surprised-ish. One of them isn't as surprised as the other. I don't remember who it is. Not really important. But she kind of reveals herself that she's both Shallan and Vale, and then Shallan has an interesting phrase about the balance between Vale and Shallan. Eliot, do you want to talk about this? You have it in the outline.
I did note this down because it is right at the end of the chapter, She reveals her character. The others are, kind of surprised, kind of like, oh, we knew something fishy was going on. And so they're kind of talking about, oh, okay, there's Shallan, there's Vale. Like, oh, I thought Vale was the real person and Shallan was the fake. And then Shallan kind of responds back like, actually, they're both equally false. And I kind of paused there like, hold on a second, Shallan. Are you being sarcastic, or is this you starting to lose it? Have you forgotten who the real you is? We've talked before about the possibility of her potentially, getting lost in her lies, getting lost in these multiple personas that she's developed for herself, and the danger of that. Is that happening here? It almost kind of plays off like she's joking or something like that, but at the same time, I kind of wonder, like, uh-oh.
I remember on my first read through, I was listening to that and on the audiobook, and I was like, excuse me? Shallan is the character and Vale is the persona, and Shallan is saying, oh, no, they're both personas. They're both equally false. I'm like, okay.
In my mind, I thought of this almost as a like power grab of like, you don't know who I am. Like kind of that like
okay.
Yeah. Like which historically I've always been like, ooh, Shallan is super wound up in her identities and that's really dangerous and stuff, which I still think is extremely possible and honestly more likely. But kind of my thought reading or hearing this was more of like, oh no, they're both fake. So they're like, oh, like who are you? Like mystical, kind of, I don't know.
Right. It's her
reserves
saying,
more power.
It's her saying, I'm neither one. Or, like.
You know what this really is? Proof that she's actually Light Song.
You're right.
This is
exactly right.
This is the moment.
She's neither Shallan nor Vale. She's Light Song.
Right. Clearly, she must be Light Song.
Ooh, glad we finally got the missing piece.
We solved that question.
Thank you so much, Brandon Sanderson, for answering this question in a timely manner. Oh my goodness. Now that's great.
You heard it here first, everyone.
You heard it here first 4 or 5 months ago. Like, we were on top of this early.
It was I had a really keen eye for this. It's so really grateful to finally get the confirmation we've been seeking. So
if you're really confused right now,
it, Trevor, I know you're holding your tongue on this one, trying to not give it away. So
if you're listening and you're really confused right now, go back like 12 episodes and listen to us theorizing about
in Warbreaker.
Yes,
reading Warbreaker and reading about Light Song, and I drew some similarities there between Light Song and Shallan. So, oh man, all right,
chapter 63. Shallan is doing the first prod into the castle. She goes in and disguises herself as a messenger from the Shattered Plains and says, yo, I have a message. And she notices a couple weird things about the city headed up there. Did you guys pick up on this? Did you care? As she was going through the city, she sees a couple things. She notices a couple things.
So we haven't talked yet about I think they call them the cult of moments or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
These people that they notice, I think is actually even when they first enter the city, these people are like dressing up like Spren and parading around the city. And I'm getting the vibe that they're like worshiping the Spren almost, is what it sort of seems like. A very cultish, a very religious sort of thing. And Shallan seems to notice that they appear to be the ones controlling the Oathgate. She sees the Oathgate area, she recognizes it, and she sees these cultist people all around it, which seems scary.
Did you guys remember her thoughts on the guards? Where as she was approaching the castle, there was these grand villas and like big houses that all had personal guards, and they were all. Did you guys catch a couple adjectives here?
So the word that keeps coming up for all of this is wrong. They keep using, they feel wrong. And something that I couldn't quite wrap my head around, maybe the audiobook helped you better with this Paul. She seems to like look at something and it seems wrong, but then when she like looks closer, it seems fine. Where like she sees the soldiers and they look wrong. They don't seem like they have faces, but then when she looks closer, okay, yeah, they do have faces. It's okay. So it's almost like there's this almost illusion in front of them, or there's this they're meant to be sort of like a mockery of what's right, that it kind of maybe doesn't she notices the wrongness at first, but then when she looks closer, whatever the power is kind of shows her a little more. I don't know, I was having a hard time with it.
It is. I almost think of this in the same vein as when we saw Raish appear, or so. Wasn't it when, I don't know if this was when we were first introduced or not, but Shallan is having there's the scene where she kind of creates a whole like audience for her and does this like show or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
This whole thing. And then she realizes one of them isn't what she made. And it runs off. Or we speculate, is this something she created out of improper like use or craziness or what? And then we realize it's not. But at first it was like blending in, I guess. And on deeper look, we know it was like a very twisted like creation, I guess, or not accurate. And that's kind of what I'm thinking of here. Of like we're seeing things that like on the surface, it's like okay, whatever, a person or guard. And then as you kind of look closer, they seem to be like wrong or like dark or like I've almost had the mindset of they're like influenced or maybe possessed would be a word you could use there. Where they're almost like a shell of who they were. They're kind of being controlled or something.
I wanted to ask you about this, Paul. I want to come back and talk about Vale in a second, actually, before we go too far. But since we're talking about the guards in particular, Paul, I wanted to get your thoughts on this. I'm a little confused. So going through the kind of the end of these chapters here, we get to see these guards who clearly seem to be acting under the influence of something else, right? She walks, spoiler, she walks into the palace and gets stabbed, killed, dumped. She gets out, she survives, yada, yada. We'll talk about that in more detail in a second. But I'm confused because it doesn't seem like the guards are like completely under the control of something else. They're not like mindless. And the reason I say this is when she enters in as a messenger, she gets questioned by the guard captain. The captain says, "Ooh, I was on the Shattered Plains. I know some people out there. Who was your captain?" And Shallan luckily knows like who the captain of the messengers was and can answer that. But that seems like information that's in the head of that guard, not necessarily information that's like coming from a spren or something like that. So it seems like the guards are still like conscious that they're still people. It's not like they've been completely taken over by some other thing that's just mindlessly controlling them. But at the same time, they seem to be very clearly acting under the control of a very dark force. What was your take on all that, Paul? Is this complete mind control? Is this some sort of weird corruption? Like, what did you think?
Yeah, my understanding, which I am really glad you brought this up, my understanding is that it's like, I assume that there's this like spren or being that is like always watching, and they get to kind of be themselves, and then whenever the spren needs to or the host needs to, they just kind of like then take over and do their thing. Like in that case, it's like, okay, he's a guard, he can stand there, and he's basically under control, but main gray area on if they know they're being controlled or not.
Right.
So did you guys know? I'm gonna piggyback off what you just said, Paul. Did you guys notice the changed behavior of the guards. Elliot, what you're talking about at the beginning of the scene, they're fairly normal. That she goes up to like the man at arms there and says, "Yo, I'm a messenger from the Shattered Plains." The captain comes up and questions her a little bit. This is a fairly normal conversation, and then there's a switch, and they just stab her. Nobody says a word, and they all walk away.
Exactly. This is like, if this were in a movie or show or something, this would be like, oh my goodness, like they're obviously not normal humans, right? Like this is something weird. And I thought of that too, Trevor. And I think the notable thing for me, so if I remember this correctly, they have their fairly normal conversation. She's like, I brought a message for so and so, and they're like, okay, cool. And that's kind of it. And then Shallan is like, or Vale is like, well, I need to deliver it to them. And then she's just like instantly stabbed. Like it's just like sets it off, and instantly she gets stabbed and dumped. And I'm assuming that was kind of the like, okay, like the Spren or Unmade kind of just takes over, then knows that this is something different and just thwarts it right there. Was my understanding.
That does seem to make sense. It still seems a little bit odd to me that so many people are going along with this. Like all the guards appear to be acting as if everything's fine. You would think that, okay, if whatever this being is takes control of the guard captain, runs Shallan through, at least one of the guards standing there is going to be like, wait, what the heck just happened? Like something wrong is going on here. But no, they all just don't even blink and continue on. And it's like, well,
I'm definitely under the assumption that this is like a hive mind situation. Like at least whatever. Like I said, my understanding is kind of, or my guess is like, they kind of have their own free will, or at least their knowledge, but the puppet master kind of behind the scenes is like in control and can just take over like at the blink of an eye and just like do that, and just took control of them, like did that, and they just go. And so I'm under the assumption that they don't really know what they're doing, because there would be some kind of reaction. At least one of them would be like, hold on, wait, why did you do that, you know? If that were the case. So
thinking about this too, we have at least one other example of memories being erased. So it could be a case of this Spren takes control of them, does whatever, and then leaves, taking the memories of that with them, right? So maybe they don't even remember that they just murdered someone in cold blood, and then they go on with their lives. Definitely a lot of possibilities still.
Good stuff.
So is now a good time to pop back to Vale real quick?
Yeah, go ahead and go back to your words, because I think that's what you want to talk about here.
Yes, it is. So we'll keep going with the story in a second. But before Shallan actually goes into the palace, there's a little bit that actually caught my attention. She's getting into the Vale persona, right? She's putting on that character, mentally and physically. And she has this like moment where it's her and Kaladin together, and she's like, noticing Kaladin and feeling kind of attracted to him. And she has this thought where she's like, oh, Vale is even more attracted to Kaladin than Shallan is. And Vale is even like, oh, that silly Shallan. What does she see in Adolin? And I just like paused for a second, because I was like, wait a second. This is getting confusing. We've already got a love triangle, right? Between Kaladin and Adolin and Shallan. Now we basically have a 4-person love triangle that's still only 3 people. That is something only Shallan could have come up with. This is just silly at this point. We have 3 people with 4 personas, all loving different ones in the oh man.
Because then when she's Shallan, she'll be like, oh, Adolin's so nice. And then when she's Vale, suddenly like, oh, Adolin stinks,
Right? And poor Kaladin's just going to get drug in every which way. Like Shallan's going to flirt with him when she's Vale, but then, just make fun of him and give him nasty disguises when she's Shallan. Like, oh boy.
Oh man. Like whenever I talked about I'm worried about Shallan getting too caught up in her disguises. I didn't think of this aspect, but it's just so unhealthy. Like it's just so bad. Like I'm so and so right now. So now I like Kaladin, but if I'm Shallan, I like Adel. Like that's so. Oh my goodness. We don't need to talk about it further, but that's just so rough. That aggravates me.
It's going to cause her problems. We've already talked about how the multiple persona things is going to cause her problems. This is a new aspect of problems about to be caused if Shallan can't even decide who she's flirting with. Oh, brother.
We mentioned it briefly, but we'll go back and touch on it before we go to our Dalinar chapters. Shallan gets stabbed, gets thrown over the shoulder of this soldier, and she's getting carried down to the cellar, the dungeon, whatever. I don't remember what it is. And as they're walking down this hall, she peeks open her eyes, and they're passing a mirror, and she sees something in the mirror. Did you guys pick up on this?
I picked up on it only to write down like, huh? What was that? It was one of those weird moments where it was like clearly that was important and strange. But what was it? There was clearly some sort of probably a spren in that mirror. Was it the Unmade? Was it like I was actually wondering if it was like the spren of the palace. We've kind of seen that before, where like spren of entire buildings like maybe feel some way is like that spren feeling tortured because this Unmade is taking over the palace. I don't know. It was something weird.
Any guesses, Paul?
No, I was confused. I'm assuming it is like my initial thought was something to do with like how our people in this palace are seeing themselves. Like we said, like they may not know what they're doing, and maybe they look in this mirror and they're like, "Oh, I look great today." Like it's somehow.
Is this a picture of Dorian Gray all over again? Have you read that book?
No, but I'm sure that your connection's accurate. I'll trust you on that.
Yeah. It could play into our thoughts or your thoughts, Paul, on maybe this Unmade spren is like watching everything that's going on in the palace, and just when it needs to step in and control events, it does so. So maybe like it's watching through the various things that are around the palace. So maybe it's in the mirror and it's watching, and it's waiting for when it needs to step in and control something, perhaps.
I could definitely see that. I mean, do we think that poses a direct threat to our heroes going in? Do we think someone's going to get mind controlled, or
it's possible?
Anything like that? Or maybe our characters that don't have a spren. Maybe this kind of I could see it being something like that, where it's like if you don't have a spren, they can kind of take control, but maybe your heroes are going to be safe. That's some good plot armor that makes logical sense. That could also just be out of left field and not matter. It'd just be wild speculation. So,
is this going to turn into that annoying stealth level that's in every video game where you have to sneak through the palace without getting caught by the Unmade spren, and you keep getting caught and having to start it over?
You have to try it like 25 times.
Over,
yep.
And over and over, just to get back to the regular levels. Not that that's ever happened to me.
Never.
Yeah.
One quick thing before we move on. This is the same palace that Szeth attacks in the prologue of all three of our books. I don't know why I do this, but for so long in my head, I always have them at the Shattered Plains already. When Szeth is attacking, I always imagine them at that palace in the Shattered Plains, and that's what he's attacking, but that's not true. They are here in the palace of Kholinar. That this is the palace that Szeth attacks that first time in the prologue. So just keep that in the back of your head.
There's a handy map of Kholinar in the book. We should get that artwork for Paul probably, because you probably have not seen that. It kind of points out like where the palace is and where the Oath Gate is. So it's definitely helpful.
I will pull that probably next week for you. Anything else for our Shallan, Steph?
I would say my summary is that I feel like she's doing good things right now in the palace. Like, she's doing a good job. But the concern is, like, at what cost? Like, she's just gone off the deep end. But she's doing nice. Like, she's getting things done, you know?
It's going okay so far. I mean, Shallan got stabbed to the chest, but it's okay. She survived. We're good.
She can do that, yeah.
Right. We're learning some things. It's going okay so far, but there's some dark things going on here. That this might get weird fast.
Like, she may be a hero, but like at what cost? Kind of thing.
Yes.
And to like her mental fortitude. So we will see.
All right, good stuff. 2 Dalinar chapters to close out our episode this week. Ellie, do you want to start with our epigraph? You have it on our outline here.
Yeah, a brief little sidebar here. So for chapter 64, the epigraph caught my eye. I maybe should just read it for you, actually. We can pause for a second while I flip there, because it hints at, one of the bigger questions we're trying to track down, which is what happened to cause the recreants. We've got all these hints of something massive has happened. Some people know, others don't. What the heck could it be? The epigraph from 64 is actually one of the first little, gems coming out of the wall that seems to be useful. The rest almost seem to be like, excerpts from people's diaries. Well, this one says this. The disagreements between the Skybreakers and the Windrunners have grown to tragic levels. I plead with any who hear this to recognize you are not so different as you think. From drawer 2719, Topaz. And that seemed to maybe hint at what could have caused our Recreants event, actually. We've kind of theorized before that it could be some sort of internal conflict amongst the Knight Radiants. Did one order like turn against the rest? Did one order, betray, something else? This seems to be direct evidence that there is conflict between the Skybreakers and the Windrunners. So
bring it, Paul.
And I think we apparently
exactly. As long as I'm a good one.
Probably. We've seen what Skybreakers are capable of. So so maybe this it? Is this the cause? Did something come to a head and the Skybreakers like attack the Windrunners, or the Windrunners attack the Skybreakers, and everyone else is like, "Whoa, I didn't sign up for this. I'm out." Maybe it doesn't seem to quite answer all the questions, but maybe this is a thread we can start to pull on, or start to look for, maybe for a cause, perhaps.
All right, so this is confession time for me.
Oh dear.
My first read through of Oathbringer was a listen, and I heard this epigraph, and I got so impatient with the question that you're asking yourself. I did a big no, and I listened to all the epigraphs for the whole part before continuing to read. I listened to all the epigraphs to I didn't read chapters out of order. I just listened to all the epigraphs back to back just to hear them all. And I spoiled something for myself. I learned something that I wasn't supposed to know at the time.
Our fearless leader, Trevor.
I'm sorry.
I know.
We're learning his dark past.
Yes.
And it's
How dare you?
No, I remember listening to this epigraph. I'm like, oh, Skybreaker and Windrunner conflict. I need to know more. And I caved and I listened to all the epigraphs.
I feel like if you were a Lightweaver, that would have been like one of your ideals you just spoke right there. Yeah. That was, if you were a Lightweaver, like that was a huge moment for you, like sharing that truth. Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But don't ever do that again.
I won't.
Yeah, please. When the last book comes out, Trevor, you can't jump ahead.
I won't. I definitely learned my lesson.
Yeah.
We'll help you stay strong. You can do it.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So, the Stormfather and Dalinar having conversation as per usual, as we've come to know, and the Stormfather is rather forthcoming in this chapter. We get some.
He's turning out to be very useful. We are learning a lot from this guy.
Yeah. What did we learn today?
So he talks to Dalinar and just kind of offhand reveals, like, "Oh yeah, I know where one of the heralds are," and Dalinar's like, "Wait, you what? And you didn't think to share this before?" And the Stormfather, replies with the classic, "Well, you didn't ask me before," and I thought that was pretty great.
It was. It seems like a big part of our story in general is like people knowing things and just not sharing with the class, and then and apparently. So like if everyone put all their information on the table, I feel like things would be going a lot quicker.
But the information he does share is super useful and actually resolved, I think, a mistake I had made in my headcanon. So he reveals that he knows where the herald Ishar is. And he goes further on to talk about how Ishar is the herald of the bondsmiths. Right, Trevor? Did I catch that correctly?
You did, yep.
And it drops a few bombs like, oh, and Ishar's the one who came up with the idea for the Knights Radiant. It was the initial founder. He was the initial founder of the Knights Radiant. He's also known as the Binder of Gods, which sounds ominous. And I had actually concluded myself that Ishar was the herald of the Lightweavers, which I've now learned is incorrect. And the reason why I had thought that was back in Words of Radiance. Remember back to the scene where Shallan is poking around. She's testing out her abilities of espionage, and she gets into the chamber where Talonel the Herald is being held. And she talks to him. They have a conversation. And Talonel says, "Oh, you're one of Ishar's knights." And like blah, 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 rambles on like da-da-da-da. And I think we had heard the name Ishar before. We knew that Ishar was a herald. So I immediately clicked that as like, oh, he just saw Shallan do light weaving. And so he's saying, oh, you're a knight of Ishar's order. What I now realize is that's not what he was saying at all. He was referring to simply the fact that Ishar had founded the Knights Radiant. And he's thinking, oh, you're one of those mere human beings that's a Knight Radiant that Ishar has founded. Did I correct myself correctly there, Trevor? Am I on the right page now?
You did, and you are on the right page now.
Okay.
And Brandon Sanderson does things like that on purpose. He writes things like that on purpose so that you think down one way, like, oh, Ishar is a Lightweaver. Ishar is the herald of the Lightweavers. No, you just got caught with the grammar. Haha, gotcha. Like Ishar is the herald that founded the Knights Radiant, and she's just a Knights Radiant, is what Talonel. Yeah, that is completely intentional. The pitfall you fell for there.
That's kind of cruel. Come on, Branderson Sanderson. I expected a lot more highly of you.
Brandy Sandy.
But no, that's actually kind of cool. I won't lie.
And Paul, now we know where Trevor gets it from.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
True.
Wow.
So yeah, that was a big moment for me, learning that, oh, Ishar is a herald, not of Lightweavers, but of bondsmiths, and the original founder of the Knights Radiant. And we know where he is. The Stormfather reveals that he's known as Tezim. Somebody help me with the name here.
Yeah, I believe you're correct. Hold on.
I know I wrote this in my notes. Where did I put this?
I actually don't remember.
Tazim. Tazim is how they say it.
Yeah, and I think we've heard a mention of this before. I'm looking at my map. Yeah, one of the Western countries over by Azir is like always at war with its nearby country, and they talk about how the god priest or god king of this place, Tazim, is like behind all of that. That's who this is that they're talking about. Here's this Herald Ishar, who the Stormfather says he's crazy. You know, Dalinar is like asking why is he doing this, and the Stormfather's like, I don't know, ask him. He's insane. So, yeah, there's that bomb drop.
So how many heralds do we have that are crazy now? Confirmed. At least
3.
At least.
Who that I can name like off the top of my head. No, wait, if we count Nile 4. Because you talk about Talonel, we learn about I almost said Ishik.
Ishar.
Yeah, we heard about Ishar. There's Nile, and then he talks about Yezrian some of just like he may be the craziest of them all. I believe that's somewhere in here. Is that here? Is that another spot? But he's the Windrunner one, right?
Do you guys remember in the prologue of this book? No. Prologue of Words of Radiance. Yasna's walking down the hall and she crosses 2 people. Do you remember this? Like 2 people are walking down the hall and having a rant. We've learned who one of them is. Do you remember?
Well, we learned one of them is Nail. Correct.
Right, yeah.
And the other... Yep, one of them is Nail. The other one is ranting to Nail, saying, I didn't think we were supposed to go insane. I'm not going insane. Are you insane? I didn't think I was insane. And then he cuts off.
Why were they there? That's my question. Why did we have 2 heralds just casually walking down the corridor? Like,
I had not considered that other person could be a herald. That could definitely be a possibility.
It's gotta be. I think, okay, either this is exactly what Trevor just said, and Brandon said is trying to trick us, or it's a herald. It's one of those 2.
So Paul, just to recap, it's either a herald or it's not a herald. That's what you've
exactly.
Okay, got it.
Exactly. It is either a herald or it is not a herald. So that only 2 options here in this case. We've narrowed it down to 2 options. So
we're getting close. We think
I'm
gonna go
cool.
read.
I bet it's. I don't know who it is.
No. Question. Let me pull this a little bit more. If he is a herald, and we do know it's a he because Yasna says it's a he, who is it? You can
Kalak.
There you go. You can figure that out. If it is a herald, it's Kalak because he's the only one who hasn't been identified right now.
Oh, I was just throwing it out there, but
hold on. Is it Yezrian? Because Dalinar thinks he recognizes Yezrian from somewhere in the vision. You remember this? He sees Yezrian and is like, oh, that guy looks familiar.
I remember seeing that, and I remember a big, question mark popping up of like, whoa, wait a second, why the heck would Dalinar recognize that dude? So that could work.
And it does make sense that our Windrunner and Skybreaker would be talking to each other, right?
Well, maybe.
So think of them as I kind of think of them as kind of sister groups.
They are
kind of sort of. They both fly around.
They are next to each other on the wheel of search. So
in my head, it makes sense that they would be talking to each other. So,
but we also just learned that there potentially conflict between the 2 of them could be the source of why the whole Knights Radiant fell apart to begin with.
Right.
So that's true. We don't have any idea of what Order Kalak would be, do we? I'm just curious because he was like our opener, and I think he's super cool. But
you do, but I'm not going to give it to you. I mean, okay.
That's okay.
I could give you 5 minutes of piecing together stuff, but I will save that for another day.
Okay, that's fine. On our topic of big people and things, I don't actually remember who's talking about it. Maybe I think it's Dalinar talking to the Stormfather, and mentions like cultivation. And I think it was really funny that the Stormfather was like, "I'd like to see someone try to bond cultivation. Like, I'd really like to see that." And I thought that was really funny. But it also made me think, like, Stormfather's like on the same tier, right, as ODM and cultivation, right? Oh, okay, I was wrong.
Honor is on the same tier.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
And the Stormfather is Honor's Spren, if you want to think about it that way.
Okay. That makes more sense. Because I was like, how is someone going to... Like, if someone can bond the Stormfather, can't they do that with cultivation or ODM too? I mean, sure, it may not be casual, but...
That
makes way more sense.
This entertains the question that's in our outline from Eliot here is... There's a term called siblings in here that the Stormfather uses to talk about himself, is that he is corresponding siblings of, we're assuming, Spren, that correspond to something. So what does that mean?
And this touches back to our conversation 2 or 3 episodes ago, I want to say, where we talked about Bondsmith. The fact that there's exactly 3 of them. And Trevor, you helped us understand that our world of Roshar here has 3 shards, or godly being powerful things. And so we started jumping to some conclusions of like, is the bondsmith bonding with those shards? Are they bonding with honor? And maybe perhaps, Dalinar's only bonding with the Stormfather because that's all that's left of honor. Well, here in this conversation, the Stormfather reveals a little bit of information because he laughs at the suggestion of someone bonding cultivation. Well, yeah, that too. Of bonding cultivation, which actually implies that it's possible. Notice that does kind of imply that that's something that could happen. It just seems ridiculously impossible. But he does seem to infer that there's like siblings, or maybe like other spren that are maybe associated with the gods as we know them, perhaps.
In my head, it makes perfect sense that the Stormfather is like, I'd like to see someone try to bond cultivation, and then Lift just goes and casually bonds cultivation.
Totally, that's exactly what would happen.
Perfect sense in my mind. She just walks up and is like, "Hey, want to be my friend?" And then they're just bond. Like, in my head, that makes total sense.
And then
for no
Odium and the Stormfather are just super upset at Lift for...
they're like, hold on a second here. And we still don't understand a lot of the mysteries of Lift, and she just casually kind of does this thing, But
if that is not in the next book, I'll be disappointed.
Me too, honestly. I'll be a little bit disappointed.
It's the opening prologue of Rhythm of War.
Oh, yes.
It's the same night that Gavilar is assassinated, but Lift is just bonding cultivation.
Yeah, just casually.
Yep. That's great. I think, though, the Night Watcher may be tied into this. We've learned that the Stormfather is a Spren, sort of a remnant of honor, but he's big, he's powerful, he's very important. The only other comparison I could think of is the Night Watcher. We've been told the Night Watcher is a Spren. I think we have been told that. Mm-hmm. And we know how powerful she is. We know that she is like you don't mess with the Night Watcher, just like you don't mess with the Stormfather. What if the Night Watcher is like the Stormfather equivalent to cultivation? That's my theory, at least.
It very well could be. That makes a lot of sense. if that's the case, do we have an equivalent with odium?
And that's the next great question: is if the Stormfather is the spren for honor, and the Night Watcher is a spren for cultivation, it makes sense that there would be one for odium. The Stormfather even says siblings, plural, so there's more than one of these types of beings. Definitely could be one for odium.
Would you like to hear the theory that popped into my head that it's on the same tier as Shalana's Light Song?
I'm ready.
So if Shallan is neither Vale or Shallan, she could be Odium's sibling person, you know?
Goodness.
So
excuse me? Okay.
Wow.
Just because last episode Syl accused Shallan of being Spren-like does not mean that she is.
I mean, I've been confusing her for a Spren for a week now.
And you've accused her of being the ultimate villain of this whole thing, and it's all coming full circle.
It is. It really is. And so, so prove me wrong. Change my mind. So, anyways, jokes aside, there. I don't know who our odium equivalent is.
Here's a theory that just popped into my head.
Uh-oh.
The thrill. We've had a we've had a hint somewhere along the line, I don't even remember where, that the thrill may be tied to the presence of either a certain type of spren or one specific spren. What if that spren is the spren of odium? And I'm thinking of, like, how odium claims that he's pure emotion. He's all the emotions. He's hate, he's love, he's all of this. The thrill is kind of, an emotion in and of itself. It's like an extreme, adrenaline hit of emotions. What if those are linked together somehow?
I like that more than my idea. I'm
not throwing yours out.
Unbiased.
It goes on the whiteboard too.
Yeah. Yes. After deep contemplation, I will barely slide over to that side as a good idea. So that's actually a really cool idea, and we've known that the thrill is something important, or at least we've kind of released that recently from this book, and so that makes sense. That magnitude seems to match up.
The thrill's certainly been mentioned 5 times as much in this book than it has in the other 2 books combined. So,
and we've seen it for a long time, so it makes it, like, if that is a reveal of some sort, that would be like really grand and hold a lot of significance because we've seen it since this beginning.
Another part to this would actually be that, have you guys heard references to the thrill being region locked? Like it's present in specific regions, and then compare that to the Stormfather, who's kind of restricted to the storm, and then the Night Watcher, you have to go to the Night Watcher. Like, there are specific regions of where the Night Watcher lives, where the Stormfather goes, like, and then the thrill is in a specific region. There's something to back up your theory, Elliot.
Yep. I like it. I'm going to stick with it now.
All right. Stormlight. We get an interesting definition of Stormlight from the Stormfather. We get a history lesson this episode.
We're still not done with good nuggets from the Stormfather.
Honestly, this is really cool. So the Stormfather just says that, like, how Stormlight works, and that it's infinite power from the spiritual realm passing into the physical realm. So now we have a cognitive realm. Oh, that was the third one, right? It was like physical, cognitive, and spiritual, right?
Correct.
Okay. So we don't see that much from the spiritual realm, right? We've seen the cognitive realm, that's shades more and all that stuff, right?
Correct.
So, interesting. So this is from the spiritual realm, and I guess they just have a lot of power generators and it's kind of overflowing.
The way he described it was really helpful too. He described it as like the storm, the high storm is just like this event that allows the different realms to like merge momentarily. And so like power from the spiritual realm that's not really supposed to be in the physical realm like leaks over into the physical realm and gets apparently caught in gemstones and Knights Radiant and things like that. So that actually that's really helpful for me to start to kind of understand what is this that we're dealing with? What is this, Stormlight that powers so much in Roshar? Where's it even coming from? Well, now we kind of know. It's just like a little bit of the spiritual realm leaking over into the physical. So that was really helpful for me.
It is. This is like the first thing. It's like, oh, I don't have 100 questions after this. I have an answer.
Yeah.
That's like, so we found an answer. We did it.
And then if you contrast, if you take a step back and look at the format of your Knights Radiant, you have the actual knight who's in the physical realm, you have their spren who is in the cognitive realm, and you have their power which is in the spiritual realm. So you have a nice triforce there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. We definitely don't work enough Legend of Zelda references into this podcast.
Yeah, that's true.
At the end of this chapter, Dalinar gives Szeth's old sword, the Windrunner, or I guess Yezrin's sword if we're getting technical, to Rock.
Yes.
This was a really good chapter. There's so much stuff. And this poses kind of the ethical dilemma of is Rock is like, I'll hold on to it while y'all go do your thing, but is he gonna have to use it?
All right, predictions right now. Yes, no.
No.
I think yes. I think we've gone too long with the idea of when is Rock going to have to fight? And it's gonna happen. I think it's gonna happen.
I think this one's a red herring. This seems like a great dilemma that would have to happen. Here we have Rock who refuses to fight, but clearly we've seen him that he can. He's shown that he can. Is he going to face some sort of dilemma where everyone's about to die? Can someone step in and save the day? Well, Rock has a shard blade now, so he can. Will he get to? That seems like a good story moment we could be headed for. But we've also had a lot of these in the past where it seemed like it was setting up for a big story moment and then nothing really comes of it. So I'm going to completely just guess here and say I think this one's a bit of a red herring.
The one that instantly jumped in my mind was Pattern and Syl having their first conversation.
Yeah.
And they still haven't, like there's definitely things that have been set up and then they're just,
Well, and now's actually a good time to talk about something I wanted to bring up. Another one, Adolin killing Sadeas. I thought, and I talked about this, I think, at the end of Words of Radiance, I thought that was going to be pivotal through this entire book, that Adolin was going to be struggling with this, that this is going to come back to haunt him, that this is going to, be in the back of his mind for the rest of his days. He's going to go down a dark tunnel. We're never going to see the happy-go-lucky Adolin ever again. He seems to have completely forgotten it. we have not seen one mention, aside from maybe the first 10 chapters. It's a bit, there's an intrigue on it for the first 10 chapters, right, where they're trying to figure it out. Then there's the copycat killer. It all kind of, all the focus gets put on the Unmade, and we've almost completely dropped the fact that Adolin just completely in cold blood knifed Sadeas in a back alley. And I thought for sure that was going to be a huge character moment for him, and it so far has not been.
That's true. And so I didn't think of like so my thought was since he died in such a almost anticlimactic way that there has to be like repercussions or further story significance where Adolin is like faced I don't know.
Yeah.
He feels a great deal of remorse or like whatever, all this stuff.
Right.
And we haven't seen that. So is it like Sadius just kind of died because he needed to be removed from the story right now, but there wasn't the best way to do it, if that makes sense? Or what?
Or is it supposed to be just that like revenge moment of that Sadius was a terrible person and we got our revenge on him. Done. Moving on.
Adolin couldn't stand it and just went ahead.
Yeah.
Adolin, as a character in general, has kind of been dropped for the first half of this book. We haven't had that many Adolin scenes. It's all been, Dalinar, and then the rest of our Bridge 4 was all part 2 and stuff like that. Adolin's kind of been there. He's been in scenes. He said some dialogue, but he hasn't really had that many scenes.
He's probably been off screen spending time with his little spren he's discovered or something like that, and he'll be
there's a theory.
Stoneward or a Will Shaper, one of the ones we haven't seen, really. So
I think the only thing I can honestly think of like an Adolin moment in this book is there was a scene where like Adolin Renarin had a conversation with like at Urithiru and Renarin like heals him or inspires him in like a little moment there. But yeah, aside from that little character moment, you're right. We haven't really spent too much time in Adolin's head. But yeah, bringing back to this chapter. No, go ahead, Paul.
Which I wanted to mention was we haven't seen a Dalinar flashback chapter in a while, or like at least we didn't get one in the last episode or this one. And I'm wondering if they're waiting until like this current dilemma is over to start that again, or if we're gonna see more this part. Or
the last 3 sentences of 65 might answer your question for you.
Okay.
This is getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but we better be getting one pretty darn soon because we got left on a cliffhanger at the end of 65, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, coming back to 64, Rock now has the Windrunner Honorblade. That like we just learned a bunch of other stuff in this chapter, but I feel like that one should not go overlooked. Like that seems like, wait a second. Rock is now walking around with an Honorblade. I mean, think about that. That gives him the full abilities of a Windrunner. Like Zeth level of abilities that we saw before. This is not just like, hey, hang on to this. This seems like a big deal.
Also, kind of side note, that Rock has now accomplished his original quest from coming down from the Horneater Peaks. He came down from the Horneater Peaks to win a Shardblade, and he just got one.
That's a good point.
He did. It's a pretty cool one to get, It's like not just any Shardblade.
True.
And I do have to say I think it's good that he has it, because if there's someone that I trust without the guidance of a spren right now, it would be Rock.
Be Lopin.
So... oh my
Please
goodness.
No. Please no.
That would be horrifying. I forgot about Lopin. It's been a little while since we've seen Lopin, it feels like, but oh my god. What if on that train of thought, what if Lopin had Nightblood?
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
I'm with you, Paul. If anyone I would trust to hang on to a very powerful weapon, Rock is probably the best. He as was in my first reaction, perhaps a waste of a powerful weapon if Rock refuses to use it, but also probably one of the safest hands to have that in. So we'll see what happens.
All right. 65. Dalinar is approaching the Azish again. He's brought Gox into a couple visions now, not really getting anywhere, but they have agreed to open their Oath Gate to him to at least talk. And he brings a lot of Azish style arguments with him that Yasna and Navani have drawn up for him, and they are very persuasive.
This is smart. This is really smart. If you want to, persuade someone to join your cause, going to them and speaking to them in their language, and I don't mean that literally, I mean that like, figuratively, although he does that literally as well. Come to them with things that mean something to them. Don't just go in and try and, fight a duel with one of their princes and let him stab you as a show of force. No, come in with essays that are very astutely written and make a very, convincing case through, poetry, because that's what they are going to respond to. That's their language. That's what they do. So this is actually really tactful. I'm sure this was not Dalinar's idea. I'm sure this was like Navani's idea or Yasna. This seems like a very Yasna thing to do. But just as like a group, this was absolutely the right way to tackle this, and it works too.
Yeah. You said speak their language, and I've read this book multiple times, and I completely forgot the scene was in here. He goes through the Oath Gate. All the spearmen are like, shakily trying to like keep him back or whatever. He grabs the arm of one of them, and the Stormfather is like, yeah, you can speak his language. Or Dalinar has this thought ahead of time, like, I can almost understand him. And then the Stormfather says, yo, touch him. And he just grabs the arm and holds on to him as he's trying to like squirm out of his hands. And then he can speak Aesish.
Andy, I wish I had that ability. Just go like, shake hands with someone who, speaks Japanese or whatever else and just learn languages. Like, yeah, man, sign me up.
Certainly handy for trying to unite different nations to your cause.
Oh, yeah.
It is. It's kind of starting to come together, and it's cool to see like something unique. I feel like all of our Knights Radiant so far have been like, oh, I can fly, or I can break things, or like stick things back together. And this one is more like more political, I guess, or like he can unite people in speech, like in communication, which is incredibly important. And it's really cool to see that. And I think that's one of the coolest like powers we've seen so far, for sure. It definitely sticks out the most right now.
Yeah, very much out of character from the rest of them. All the rest of them seem to be, at least maybe almost all the rest of them, at least like combat related or espionage related or, try to get what you want sort of thing. This is much more, cooperative. Hey, I can share your thoughts and learn your language, although I suppose you come up with devious ways to use that too, but I agree. This seems like a rather different power. I couldn't help but thinking through this section, and it's actually mentioned in here a little bit. They're kind of running comparison of Dalinar to the Sunmaker is an interesting one. And Trevor, help make sure I get this right. The Sunmaker is the original owner of the Shardblade Oathbringer, right?
Correct.
So there's kind of this running, comparison or theme of, is Dalinar walking in the footsteps of the Sunmaker? And we've learned that the Sunmaker was a very bloodthirsty tyrant who came in and conquered lands and slaughtered a lot of people, and is a large reason why the Azish people don't trust the Alethi, because last time they dealt with him, it was the Sunmaker, and he just kind of came in and wrecked everything. And here is Dalinar coming in and doing something very different than the Sunmaker did. He's coming in looking to cooperate. He's looking to meet the Azish on their level, not just kind of come in and force them to do things his way. So this, I noted, was an important deviation from walking in the footsteps of the Sunmaker, and something that I really admire about modern day Dalinar that old day Dalinar would not have done. I'm sure we're very soon going to be going back to, flashback Dalinar to perhaps learn something, rather dark, but this was a positive moment, at least for now.
right at the end of this chapter, Dalinar has a couple triggers in his mind, which all culminates to the last couple sentences of this chapter. Do you guys remember what those triggers are that fires in his brain for this? I can refresh your mind if you don't have it, if you don't remember what it is.
I do not.
One of them is like treated like an animal or something like that. It's like,
so one of them is he's admiring the tents and the canopy of the Azish marketplace, and it looks like lattice working of like bridges and stuff like that. And he's like, oh, that reminds me of something. And then as he's leaving, the Azish are like, man, we're really impressed with you. You didn't come in and act like an animal. And as he goes back through the Oath Gate, those two things combined trigger something in his mind. He remembers everything that happened to Evie, and it ended at the rift. Is what the chapter ends on. And the lattice working reminds him of the rift, which is all like a bunch of, I think of Goblin Town when I think of the rift. It's a bunch of like wooden structures on the side of these caves and stuff like that. And so that's what triggered in his mind, and something about the word animal, he's behaving like an animal, triggers in his mind about something that happened at the rift.
And some incredibly evil and mischievous leader of our podcast decided that was where he was going to break up the chapters for us in our reading. And so Paul and I have now been itching and waiting for days and weeks to learn whatever Dalinar just learned, because we're stuck on a cliffhanger. Thank you, Trevor.
You're welcome.
But the best part about ranting about it now is, one, we get to make fun of Trevor, and two, when we're done recording, I get to go read. So
as soon as I hit stop, I'm gonna grab that book.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, spoiler alert: we have a flashback Dalinar chapter in our near future.
Oh boy.
So whatever Dalinar just learned, we may be learning soon as ourselves. Are we nervous? Are we excited?
Downright terrified.
I'm excited. I'm ready.
All right, let's read and find out. As Brandon Sanderson loves to say, thanks for joining me, Paul and Eliot. We will reconvene next week.
Let's do it.
See you on the other side.